Now then, I do. In today's video we're going to be looking a lot more in depth about how I made the modern cabriole legs for the floating top sideboard that I recently built. And to get the ball rolling I need to make a template. Now this is just going to be a marking template for marking out on the leg stock. It's not going to be a cutting template for a router, because to use a cutting template on a router, the piece that you are cutting needs to keep at least one flat side to rest on the router table, whereas this is going to be shaped on all four sides. So when I decided on this shape I was concerned with three dimensions. One is obviously the length of the leg. The second was the square portion at the top of the leg, how large that needed to be given the size of the tenons that I wanted to use. And the third dimension was the narrowest part of the leg just above the foot, how narrow I could get away with that whilst still supporting the full weight of the cabinet. And once I'd established that, I'd simply marked it out on the 9mm ply and then cut it out on the bandsaw. Now when I cut this I was in desperate need of some new bandsaw blades. I had a lot of wobble going on and stuff like that, and as a result, after cutting it out on the bandsaw I had to do a lot of refinement with hand tools to make sure that the shape was exactly how I wanted it and that it was all smooth and stuff like that. So moving on to the refinement of the template, I used a number 5 jack plane to get rid of all the high spots and to generally smooth out the long flats. And then for the shorter parts I used spoke shaves, sandpaper, and even a file in one instance, although that's not shown here, just to completely refine the shape to how I wanted it, make sure that all the long flats were actually straight, and the sandpaper obviously to remove any burrs and splinters and stuff like that. So whilst I'm talking about this, I might as well go into a little bit of detail behind my thinking. The normal approach to legs on something like this would just be a taper on two sides. However, I saw a fine woodworking article where Mike Pekovic made a modern cabriole leg and I really liked it and I drew inspiration from that. So this one is quite a bit different from his, in that it has the foot shape on it as well. But the initial idea came from him, where he had the step out at the top, like on this leg. And the number of design iterations that the legs went through, I probably did 30 or 40 sketches to get this right. And this was months before I made the cabinet, and a lot of months before I designed the cabinet as well. As I said in the other video, the actual design of the cabinet just went through 2 design sketches, that's it. But the legs, I treated them separately and they actually went through a lot of design work to get them how I wanted, and to get the tapers just right so that it was both structurally strong but still looked elegant. And I think in the final piece I've achieved that really well. And moving on from that, the next step is to cut the mortises. So to do this I keep the leg stock square, and on one face I drew around the template just so I could see where the mortises need to go, and then set the mortiser up to cut in that location. After that I don't need the template for cutting the mortises. And probably the next video is going to be a review on this mortiser. So if you're interested in that, although it is a bit of a luxury and I know most people don't own one, stick around because it won't be long in coming. Now this part of the video here I've left at normal speed so you can see, even with a benchtop mortiser, just how quickly these mortises can be cut in furniture. So these mortises are 45mm deep, 1/2 inch wide in one pass with a 1/2 inch chisel, and 60mm long. So for furniture scale mortises they're actually quite big, and considering that they've been cut with a 1/2 inch chisel, it goes amazingly quickly. Obviously the thinner the chisel you use, the quicker the mortises are to cut, but you end up with either narrow mortises or having to do more passes to get the same width. And that's the mortise cut, so all I do now is just brush off the waste and I run over the mortise again just to tidy up the side walls. And most of the waste that you see coming out here is actually just loose waste that's already in the bottom of the mortise. It's not fresh waste that's being cut. And that's it. So even cutting the mortise and tidying up the side walls, you're looking at what, maybe a minute and a half maybe. And the next step is to cut the two tapers, the two straight tapers on each leg. Now my table saw blade doesn't go high enough to cut all the way through whilst using this tapering jig, because I made it out of scrap that I had lying around, and as a result the base is 3/4 of an inch, or 18 and a bit mil ply. So this left about 1mm or so left to cut out later. Now after cutting the two tapers, I used sticky tape, masking tape effectively, just to stick them back on to make the stock square again, so that when I come to cut it out at the bandsaw, I've still got square stock to start with. And after cutting out one side of the shaped part, I tape that back on again to give me square stock. And by this point my lines are getting a little bit dull because they're only drawn on with pencil onto a dark wood. So I have to redraw the shape of the leg on the final side, and then I cut that out on the bandsaw as well. So these legs weren't difficult to make. What they were though is confusing. I don't know if confusing is the right word actually, but they took a lot of thinking about during the making to make sure that I was cutting in the right place and making the right sort of cut. But the actual process of making them was simple. You know, it's just common workshop tools that I used. Well, I say that, it depends on what workshop you have. But all the stuff that I've done on the table saw and the bandsaw, you could easily do with hand saws. I would prefer not to, because why would you want to rip wood with a handsaw? It's just a nightmare. But then moving on from there, it's just normal hand tool cabinet sort of tools, which is rasps, files, planes, chisels, sandpaper. So the first step after using the bandsaw is using the rasp just to get rid of any really odd high spots, and then start planing. For the longer sections I use the jack plane. For the bits getting into the corners, like here, I used a rebate block plane, because that allows you to get right into the corner as the blade goes to the edge of the plane. And I start establishing the steps here. I don't actually know what you'd call them, the step house, I suppose, I don't know. Likewise, a big shoulder plane is always good to use for stuff like this, and I decided to use that there because I didn't actually want to take waste from the top of the leg. And then those angle steps out, they're refined with chisels, just doing it by hand, mark some lines and chisel away to the lines. It's as simple as that. So you cut the meat of the stuff out of the table saw and bandsaw, or with hand saws, after making your template. Plane everything flat where you can get a plane, use chisels for the steps, and you do all the final touches just with sanding blocks. And here I've just got some 9mm MDF with sandpaper glued onto it, and that's all you really need to get properly into corners and to refine everything. And all the longer stretches get touched with a normal sanding block. So whilst this video is 12 minutes long-ish, remember there are 4 legs to make, and each leg actually took about an hour and a half or 2 hours. So there's a lot that you're not seeing in this, but I haven't missed any steps out. So the chiselling took obviously a lot longer, the planing took longer, each individual bit took longer, but I haven't missed anything else, so this is the entire process effectively. And as I said, it's just finishing it all off with sanding and then removing any final marks from the chisels or anything, and ensuring that those steps out meet on the two sides where they do step out. That sounds in my head like a lot of waffle, but I hope you get what I'm aiming for. And then the very final step here is just making sure that everything is flat, square, and that those steps are, like I said, meeting at the corners, and that they're good, and that they're running straight across the leg as well, because it's very easy to have them angled without realising it. And this is literally just chasing perfection, trying to get each leg looking like the last. Now they're never going to be exactly the same because they're handmade and each one is made in isolation, you know. Other than the template at the beginning, there are no jigs for this, it's all just handwork, so they're never going to be the same. But that doesn't matter because they're going to be separated by either the length or the width of the cabinet. So as long as they look the same in separation, that's all you need. I hope you liked the video, I hope you found it useful and got something out of it. As I said, there's going to be a review of the Charnwood hollow chisel mortiser coming up, as well as another hand tool review. Keep an eye out for those. And I'm going to see if I can get any more videos out of the raw footage that I shot from the cabinet build, so things like the cabinet doors and stuff like that. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and I will see you next time. Ta-ra.